My mother-in-law let her daughter ruin my little girl's hair while I was away for only 2 hours. When I walked into that bathroom and saw my daughter crying on the cold floor, I knew this family had never truly accepted us. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Kaylin. I'm 34 years old, and I work long shifts as a nurse to give my daughter, Bree, a good life. Bree is 8, sweet, quiet, and proud of her long curly hair. She took care of it like it was something special. After I married Jace, I tried hard to build a relationship with his family. But his mother, Lenora, always made me feel unwanted. Her daughter, Veda, acted spoiled and rude every time we visited. I ignored many comments because I wanted peace for my marriage. One Saturday, the hospital called me in for an emergency shift. Jace was out of town for work, so I had no choice except to leave Bree with Lenora for a few hours. I kissed my daughter goodbye and promised I'd pick her up before dinner. When I came back, the house was strangely quiet. Then I heard Bree crying behind the bathroom door. I opened it and froze. Her curls were gone. Huge uneven chunks of hair covered the floor around her. Her face was red from crying so hard. Veda stood near the sink laughing like it was funny. She said Bree needed a better look. Lenora didn't even comfort my child. She simply shrugged and told me hair grows back. At that moment, I stopped seeing them as family. That night, after Bree finally cried herself to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen thinking about everything I had ignored over the years. The ruined haircut was not some childish mistake. It was only the latest thing in a long line of cruel behavior from Lenora and Veda. From the day I married Jace, his family treated me like I wasn't good enough. Lenora always found ways to insult me without sounding obvious. If I cooked dinner, she complained the food was too simple. If I bought something nice for Bree, she called me irresponsible with money. She loved reminding everyone that I grew up in a small town and worked hard for everything I had. Veda was even worse. She copied her mother's behavior and acted like I embarrassed their family. She laughed at my clothes, made rude comments about my accent, and constantly acted like Bree and I did not belong around them. What hurt the most was Jace never truly defended me. Every time I tried talking to him, he brushed it aside and said his mother was just opinionated. He always told me to ignore the comments because keeping peace mattered more to him than confronting his family. After a while, I stopped speaking up because I felt completely alone. As Bree got older, I noticed Lenora treating her differently too. She would stare at Bree and make strange remarks about how much she looked like me. Bree had my eyes, my smile, and my curly hair. Lenora clearly hated that. Looking back, I finally understood something painful. The haircut was never about style or fun. They knew Bree loved her hair. They knew it would break her heart. Hurting my daughter was simply the easiest way to hurt me too. Later that night, Bree refused to leave my side. She stayed curled against me on the couch with a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Every few minutes, she touched her uneven hair and started crying again. Seeing her like that made my chest ache. I kept trying to calm her down, but I could tell something else was bothering her besides the haircut itself. After a long silence, she quietly asked if I was angry with her. That question broke me instantly. I told her none of this was her fault and asked her to tell me exactly what happened at Lenora's house. Bree looked down at her hands and started shaking. She explained that Veda brought scissors into the living room and said she wanted to fix her hair. Bree said no right away and tried to walk away, but Veda grabbed her arm and pulled her into a chair. What hurt me most was hearing that Lenora watched the entire thing happen. Bree said she looked at her grandmother for help, expecting her to stop it. Instead, Lenora told her to sit still and quit acting like a baby. Bree started crying and begged them not to cut her curls because she had been growing them for years. Veda laughed while cutting huge pieces off anyway. I felt sick listening to my daughter describe how trapped and scared she felt. She said she tried covering her head with her hands, but Veda pushed them away. By the time it ended, Bree was too terrified to even look in the mirror. When Jace finally called later that night, his reaction made things worse. He sounded annoyed and kept saying there had to be another side to the story. It was clear he already doubted us. That was when I grabbed my phone and gently asked Bree to repeat what happened while I recorded everything. I had a feeling I would need proof because nobody in that family ever believed us. Jace came home the following afternoon. The second he walked through the door, Bree ran into her bedroom and shut herself inside. That alone should have told him how badly she was hurting, but he barely reacted. He looked tired and irritated, like this situation was an inconvenience instead of a serious problem. I asked him to sit down because we needed to talk. I showed him Bree's uneven hair and played the recording of her explaining everything that happened at Lenora's house. I expected him to be furious. I thought any father would be heartbroken hearing fear in his child's voice. Instead, Jay sighed heavily and rubbed his forehead. He said the whole thing had gotten blown out of proportion. Then he looked at me and calmly said, "It's just hair, Kaylin. It'll grow back." I could not believe what I was hearing. Bree had been humiliated, pinned into a chair, and left crying for hours, and that was his response. I asked him how he could defend people who treated his daughter like that. He immediately became defensive and said I was trying to start problems between him and his family. I told him Lenora and Veda owed Bree a real apology. Not excuses. Not jokes. A genuine apology. But Jace refused. He said confronting them would only create more drama and make family gatherings uncomfortable. That answer changed something inside me. For years I had accepted disappointment from him because I loved him. I told myself he was stuck in the middle. But sitting there watching him protect everyone except his own wife and child opened my eyes completely. Our argument became louder than any fight we had ever had before. Jace accused me of turning Bree against his family. I told him his family had done that themselves. For the first time since our marriage began, I realized I had been carrying the relationship alone while he kept choosing his mother over us every single time. That night, Bree refused to sleep alone, so I stayed beside her bed until she finally drifted off. Even in her sleep, she kept touching her short uneven hair like she was scared it would somehow get worse. I sat there feeling angry, exhausted, and completely heartbroken. Around midnight, I walked into the kitchen to clear my head. My phone buzzed with a notification from our joint bank account. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was another regular payment. But something about the amount caught my attention. I opened the banking app and noticed a transfer for $800 sent earlier that day. The name attached to it was Lenora's. My stomach tightened immediately. I started scrolling through older transactions and realized this was not the first payment. There were dozens of transfers going back almost a year. Some were small, others were thousands of dollars. Altogether, the amount was massive. I sat frozen at the table trying to understand what I was seeing. Jace had spent the past year telling me we needed to cut expenses because money was tight. He complained every time I wanted to spend extra on Bree. When Bree asked to join dance classes, he said we could not afford them. Last summer, I suggested taking a short family vacation, and he shut the idea down because he claimed we needed to save money. Meanwhile, he had been secretly giving Lenora and Veda our money the entire time. I remembered all the overtime shifts I picked up at the hospital. The birthdays I kept simple. The cheap clothes I bought for myself so Bree could have what she needed. I sacrificed constantly because I believed we were building a stable future together. The worst part was knowing my income had helped support the same people who hurt my daughter without remorse. While Bree went without things she loved, Lenora and Veda lived comfortably behind our backs. At that moment, the betrayal felt even deeper than the haircut. Jace had not only failed us emotionally. He had been lying to me financially for months. The next evening, Lenora invited the whole family over for dinner like nothing had happened. I did not want to go, but Jace insisted we should move on and avoid creating more tension. Bree begged me not to take her there, yet I convinced myself maybe the family would finally apologize after seeing how upset she was. The moment we walked into the house, I knew I had made a mistake. Lenora greeted everyone warmly while completely ignoring Bree. Veda sat at the dining table smirking the second she saw us. My daughter stayed close to me, pulling the hood of her sweatshirt lower over her damaged hair. At first, everyone chatted normally, unaware of what happened. Then Veda suddenly laughed and asked Bree if she was enjoying her new style. A few relatives looked confused while Bree immediately lowered her head. Before I could respond, Veda kept making little comments about how Bree looked less messy now. I watched my daughter slowly disappear into herself. She quietly slipped under the dining table, trying to hide while adults continued eating around her. When I looked down, I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. That was the moment I lost all patience. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and told everyone they deserved to hear the truth directly from Bree. The room became quiet as I played the recording from the night before. Hearing Bree's shaky voice describe being held down while crying changed the entire mood instantly. Some relatives looked shocked. One of Jace's cousins covered her mouth in disbelief. Even Jace looked uncomfortable hearing the fear in our daughter's voice played out loud. But Lenora still refused to accept responsibility. Instead of comforting Bree, she accused her of exaggerating for attention. She claimed children were too sensitive these days and said Bree should stop acting traumatized over a haircut. The excuses only made things worse. Family members who had stayed silent before finally started questioning Lenora and Veda openly. For the first time, they could no longer hide what kind of people they truly were. The drive home was completely silent. Bree sat in the back seat staring out the window while holding her hood tightly around her face. I kept glancing at her through the mirror, feeling guilty for bringing her to that dinner in the first place. The second we walked into the house, Jace exploded. He accused me of humiliating his family in front of everyone. He said I should never have played the recording at the table and claimed I turned a private issue into a public scene. I could not believe that was what upset him most. Not Bree hiding under the table crying. Not his mother insulting our child. He only cared that people finally saw the truth. I reminded him that none of this would have happened if Lenora and Veda had apologized sincerely. Instead of listening, he kept saying I enjoyed drama and always made situations worse. Hearing that after everything we had gone through felt like a slap in the face. For years I had defended Jace to friends and coworkers whenever they questioned his behavior. I always believed he loved us even if he struggled standing up to his family. But that night, something finally became clear. A good husband would never allow his wife and daughter to be treated this way. A good father would never stay silent while his child suffered. I looked at him and calmly told him I no longer trusted him. Not as my partner. Not as Bree's protector. He laughed like I was only angry in the moment and said I would cool down in a few days like always. But this time was different. There was no yelling left in me. No energy to beg him to understand. I felt emotionally exhausted, almost numb. Later that night, while Jay slept peacefully beside me, I quietly started making plans in my head. I thought about where Bree and I could stay, how much money I had saved, and what steps I needed to take next. For the first time in years, I was no longer thinking about saving my marriage. I was thinking about escaping it. Over the next few days, I stopped arguing with Jace completely. I realized there was no point wasting energy on someone who refused to see the damage his family had caused. Instead, I started focusing on Bree and myself. Bree changed after that night at Lenora's house. She barely spoke during dinner and avoided mirrors whenever possible. She used to love going outside, but now she stayed in her room drawing quietly for hours. One afternoon, Jace mentioned visiting his mother for Sunday lunch, and Bree immediately panicked. She grabbed my arm and begged me not to make her go back there. I held her close and promised nobody would ever force her into a place where she felt unsafe again. The relief on her face nearly made me cry. It showed me how deeply she had been affected by everything. While Bree was at school, I began handling things privately. I opened a separate bank account under my name and slowly transferred part of my paycheck into it. I also printed copies of bank statements, tax records, and credit card bills. The more paperwork I reviewed, the more lies I uncovered. Jace had hidden major financial decisions from me during most of our marriage. There were personal loans I never knew existed and accounts connected to his mother's expenses. I even found documents showing he helped cover Veda's rent for months while telling me we needed to budget carefully at home. A week later, I met with a lawyer during my lunch break. Sitting in that office made everything feel painfully real. I expected the lawyer to tell me I was overthinking things, but instead she looked concerned after reviewing the financial records I brought. She explained that Jace had kept important information from me and advised me to protect myself immediately. Walking back to my car afterward, I felt nervous but strangely calm too. For years I had spent my life trying to avoid conflict and keep everyone happy. But protecting my peace had never protected me or my daughter. For the first time in a long while, I finally started choosing us first. A few days after the family dinner, something unexpected started happening. People from Jace's side of the family slowly began reaching out to me privately. At first, it was small messages asking how Bree was doing. Then the conversations became more serious. One evening, Jace's cousin Mara called me while I was cooking dinner. She sounded nervous before finally admitting that Veda had always caused problems in the family. According to her, this was not the first time Lenora cleaned up a mess created by her daughter. It was simply the first time someone openly pushed back. Mara told me Veda had been fired from 2 jobs for bullying coworkers. In one office, she spread rumors about another employee until the woman quit. Lenora blamed jealousy and convinced relatives Veda had done nothing wrong. A few days later, another relative quietly mentioned missing jewelry during a family holiday years ago. Everyone suspected Veda, but Lenora pressured the family into staying quiet to avoid embarrassment. Hearing all this made me feel sick. Even one of Lenora's old neighbors contacted me after hearing about the dinner argument. She said Veda had a history of manipulating people and starting conflicts for attention. Whenever someone confronted her, Lenora defended her immediately and painted everyone else as cruel or dramatic. The more stories I heard, the clearer everything became. Bree was never singled out by accident. Veda enjoyed hurting people she saw as weaker than herself, and Lenora spent years protecting her from consequences. I started remembering moments I once ignored. The rude comments toward waiters at restaurants. The way Veda mocked relatives behind their backs. The fake smiles she used around strangers before turning cold the second they left. What shocked me most was realizing how many people already knew the truth but stayed silent to keep peace within. The family. Little by little, the perfect image Lenora worked so hard to maintain started falling apart. Relatives who once defended her were finally questioning years of excuses. And for the first time, I understood that Bree had not been their first victim. She had simply been the youngest and easiest target. About 2 weeks later, Lenora invited everyone over again, pretending the family needed a fresh start. Jace thought it was a good chance to move past the tension, but I already knew exactly what I was going to do. I did not plan to yell, insult anyone, or cause a dramatic scene. I simply decided I was done protecting people who never protected me. That evening, both sides of the family gathered in the living room talking awkwardly like nothing had happened. Bree stayed beside me quietly coloring in a notebook while Jace avoided eye contact. Lenora acted unusually cheerful, probably believing the situation had finally settled down. Halfway through dinner, Lenora started making comments about how families should forgive each other and stop holding grudges. That was my moment. I calmly stood up, walked to my bag, and pulled out a folder filled with printed bank records and financial documents. The room instantly became quiet. I explained that while Jace kept telling me our family struggled financially, thousands of dollars had secretly been sent to Lenora and Veda for years. At first, Jace looked confused because he had no idea I knew about the transfers. Lenora's face lost color the second she saw the paperwork in my hands. I placed copies of the records on the table for everyone to see. Several payments had come directly from the savings account we created for Bree's future education. I watched relatives read the dates and amounts with stunned expressions. One of Jace's uncles even asked if the documents were real because he could hardly believe it. Lenora immediately tried making excuses. She claimed Jace offered the money willingly and said family should help each other during difficult times. But nobody ignored the truth anymore. They all knew Bree had gone without activities and trips while her savings quietly disappeared. Jace sat there speechless, completely blindsided. For once, he could not talk his way around the situation or blame me for overreacting. The people who once defended Lenora started questioning her openly, and I realized something important that night. Silence had protected them for years. The moment the truth came out, everything they built began falling apart. After the family gathering ended, nobody stayed around to comfort Lenora or defend Veda anymore. People left quietly, avoiding eye contact with them on the way out. Jace barely spoke during the drive home. He looked pale and distracted, like everything that happened still had not fully sunk in. I already knew what I needed to do. While Jace sat in the living room staring at his phone, I packed our essentials into 2 suitcases. Bree helped silently, placing her favorite books and stuffed animals into a backpack without asking questions. I think part of her already understood we were not coming back. Earlier that afternoon, my lawyer had finalized temporary custody paperwork and helped me freeze the joint accounts until the financial situation could be sorted legally. I also arranged for Bree and me to stay at a small furnished apartment across town. It was not fancy, but it felt safe, and that mattered more than anything else. Around midnight, Jace left the house to meet his mother after she called him crying hysterically. The second his car disappeared down the street, I carried our bags outside and drove away with Bree asleep beside me. Before leaving, I placed a large envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside were divorce papers along with copies of the financial records. I also left a short note explaining that I was done begging him to choose us. The next morning, my phone exploded with missed calls and messages from Jace. At first he sounded angry, demanding to know where we were. But once he realized the accounts were frozen and custody paperwork had already been filed, panic took over. Meanwhile, Lenora desperately contacted relatives trying to explain everything away. But this time nobody believed her stories. Too many lies had already come to light. Even family members who used to stay neutral finally pulled away from her. For the first time in his life, Jace had nobody left shielding him from consequences. He finally understood what it cost to spend years protecting his mother while neglecting his own wife and daughter. Months passed, and life slowly started feeling peaceful again. Bree and I moved into a small apartment near her new school. It was nothing luxurious, but it felt warm and calm in a way our old house never did. For the first time in years, there was no tension hanging in the air and no fear of unexpected arguments ruining the day. At first, Bree struggled a lot. She hated looking at old pictures of herself and stayed quiet around other kids. But little by little, I watched her become herself again. Her curls slowly started growing back, and so did her confidence. She joined an art club at school, made new friends, and began smiling more often. One afternoon, she looked in the mirror while getting ready for school and finally stopped hiding under oversized hoodies. That moment meant more to me than anything else. Jace kept trying to contact me during those months. Sometimes he called crying. Other times he sent long messages apologizing and promising he would change. He admitted he failed Bree and spent too many years choosing his mother over his family. A part of me believed he regretted everything sincerely, but regret could not erase the damage already done. I had spent too much of my life accepting excuses and hoping things would improve someday. I was no longer willing to build my future on promises that only appeared after everything fell apart. Meanwhile, Lenora and Veda slowly became isolated from the rest of the family. Relatives stopped inviting them to gatherings and stopped defending their behavior. Once people finally saw the truth, it became impossible to ignore how toxic they had always been. Looking back now, I realize revenge was never really about exposing them or watching their lives collapse. The real victory came from finally protecting myself and my daughter instead of sacrificing our happiness to keep others comfortable. I used to think staying quiet made me strong. But walking away from people who kept hurting us turned out to be the strongest thing I had ever done. After everything they put my daughter and me through, I chose to walk away and protect our peace. Do you think I made the right decision, or should I have given them another chance? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more emotional real-life stories like this.